The weather, which had been merely cold and blustery, turned deadly within a week as a heavy blizzard descended upon the region, blanketing New Cody in a suffocating layer of white. This natural fury slightly delayed the mayor's plans for expanding the population, but it could not stop the momentum. From the east, 4 horse-drawn wagons slowly navigated the cracked, snow-covered pavement of the main street, their wheels groaning against the ice. Militia guards, still reeling from the mysterious loss of their scouts near Elias's farm, stood at the ready to welcome the newcomers. While the men from the wagons were marched toward the old high school, now a grim dormitory, Ella stepped out into the biting wind to meet the new recruits. "Okay, ladies, please follow me," Ella called out, her voice carrying a tough exterior tone that brooked no argument. Among the shivering flock of women, a 13-year-old girl made it a point to move up the line, pressing as close to Ella as she could. When they reached the heavy front doors of their new home, Ella reached out, pulling the young girl from the line and holding her close as she led the group inside. Once the doors were shut against the howling storm, Ella leaned down, her voice a barely audible breath against the girl's ear. "Stay quiet," Ella whispered. "I will explain everything later." The girl, eyes wide with a terror common in this twilight age, simply nodded and moved away as Ella began the orientation. The group gathered in a drafty common room. Ella stood before them, her gaze sweeping over the tired faces. "Most of you are experienced working girls, but here in New Cody things are a little different," she began. A woman named Cassidy, whose eyes still held a spark of the outspoken defiance that Sawyer usually crushed, stepped forward. "What do you mean by different?" she asked. "Some of the men who came with you are going to be put to work quickly, so don't be surprised if things are a little slow for a while," Ella explained, her mind already calculating the risks of the night. "The other thing is, most of the men living here in New Cody are elderly and aren't aggressive. They are depressed men that have lost their families and sometimes just need a shoulder to cry on." Cassidy looked around the bleak room, her voice laced with a desperate hope for autonomy. "Will we be able to move around the town?" Ella glanced toward the back corner where the preteen sat, trying to keep her explanation from being too graphic. "You probably won't want to move around too much here. The weather is pretty bad and most of the people are old and just want to rest. You girls, and a couple of you boys, will be the primary source of entertainment." The room fell silent, save for the rattling of the windows. "Once you all have a chance to settle in and get a hot meal, you can start getting ready," Ella continued. "Some of you will work tonight. I'll introduce you to some of the regulars. For those of you who aren't working, I would suggest you get some rest. You had a long trip, and you'll need it." As the women began to drift upstairs toward the barracks, Ella caught the young girl's arm, pulling her into the shadows of the hallway. "I need you to listen carefully," Ella said, her voice urgent. "Go with the others. Get something to eat and find some clothes that will keep you warm. After I take the girls to their shift, I want you to find the bed closest to the door. Lay down and try to get some sleep. I'll come get you as soon as I can." The youngster didn't speak. She simply nodded and vanished into the stairwell. Hours later, the lobby was filling with the low murmur of the regulars arriving for their scheduled time. Ella moved through the reception area with practiced ease, introducing the new girls to the men who sought a brief respite from the cold and the chaos. Once the guards and the regulars were occupied, Ella slipped away, finding the young girl exactly where she had instructed. They descended the front stairs, reaching the lobby where a lone guard stood watch. He looked up, his hand resting lazily on his rifle. "I need to take this one to find some clothes that fit her," Ella said, her voice steady. The guard, nearing the end of his shift and accustomed to trusting Ella's management of the ladies, didn't question her. Outside, the blizzard had escalated into whiteout conditions, providing the perfect cover for their movement. They moved through the blinding snow toward the general store, where a seamstress was still working under a flickering lamp. "Can you get this little one's measurements and put something together for her?" Ella asked the seamstress, maintaining the charade of a routine task. Nothing I have on hand will fit her." While the woman began her work, Ella moved through the aisles, grabbing a small cache of food, just enough to sustain them through the night. "It'll take a couple of days to finish 3 dresses," the seamstress noted, looking up from her tape measure. "That's fine," Ella replied. But as they stepped back out into the freezing wind, Ella didn't turn back toward the center of town. Instead, she gripped the girl's hand and headed west, pushing into the heart of the storm. They moved toward the outskirts, toward the territory where the Ghost had recently cleared the way by eliminating Sawyer's scouts. They were running into the teeth of the blizzard, hoping the whiteout would hide their tracks before the mayor realized his most valuable asset had finally stopped complying.